Imagine a medical treatment where the patients who are the most severely paralyzed actually see the biggest improvements, while those with, only moderate weakness don't really seem to get that same leap in progress.
Yeah, it sounds completely backwards, right? I mean, usually the people with a head start in recovery are the ones who cross the finish line first.
Exactly. But today, we are going to look at a therapy that just flips that entire assumption right on its head. So, welcome to the deep dive. We are really thrilled to have you with us today for a conversation that is, well, it's incredibly close to the heart for millions of families.
It really is. And our mission for this deep dive is to basically cut straight through the marketing hype that, so often surrounds electrical muscle stimulation.
Right, because there's a lot of hype out there.
Oh, absolutely. So instead of the hype, we want to look at the gold standard science of how this technology can actually help stroke survivors win back their everyday lives.
Because the gap between, like, an infomercial selling you a vibrating ab belt and a peer-reviewed clinical trial utilizing electrical stimulation is just massive.
It's night and day. When you look at the actual data, you start to see a highly targeted physiological intervention that plays a crucial role in neurorehabilitation.
And to navigate that gap, we are grounding today's conversation in a really rigorous 2022 Danish meta-analysis. It was published in the Archives of Rehabilitation Research and Clinical Translation.
Yeah, and we're also drawing on a beautifully written, very accessible blog post that kind of breaks down those dense clinical findings into what they actually mean for real families.
Okay, let's unpack this because before we even get into the technology itself, like the interventions and the electrodes, we need to understand the sheer scale of the problem.
Right, the biological reality of a stroke.
Yeah. Globally, we are looking at 13.7 million people who suffer a stroke every single year.
Which is just a staggering number. That represents 13.7 million lives abruptly altered. And the fundamental biological reality of a stroke is this sudden, catastrophic disconnect in the body's communication system.
Right. The brain sustains an injury.
Exactly. Often an infarct, which is basically a medical term for a blood clot that blocks flow and starves the brain tissue of oxygen. Or a hemorrhage, which is a bleed.
And because of that localized brain damage, the upper motor neurons are compromised, right?
Yeah, they take a major hit, and they are the brain's primary output for voluntary movement.
So they're the pathways carrying the commands.
Precisely. When those neurons are damaged, the signals that the brain normally sends down the spinal cord to, like tell your hand to open and your leg to step, they're suddenly vanishingly weak, or they're just entirely gone.
I was reading through our sources, and the best way I can picture this post-stroke nervous system is like a city's electrical grid immediately after a massive hurricane.
Well, I like that. That's a good way to visualize it.
Right, like the power plant, which is the brain, it might actually be largely intact after the initial storm passes, and it's actively trying to repair itself. But the power lines, those neural pathways, are completely down.
Right, the lines are snapped.
Yeah. And because the lines are down, the houses, meaning the muscles at the end of the line, are left completely in the dark. So the big puzzle in rehabilitation seems to be, how do we keep the houses functioning while the lines are being rebuilt?
That is the exact challenge. Because those houses degrade incredibly quickly when they aren't receiving signals. Muscles that just sit dormant lose mass rapidly.
They just waste away.
They do. And beyond just atrophy, patients often develop spasticity. Without the brain's constant regulating signals, the spinal cord essentially panics.
Wait, the spinal cord panics, what does that mean?
Well, it starts sending disorganized signals, right? Causing the muscles to become constantly tight, stiff, or involuntarily flexed. Standard physiotherapy is the absolute bedrock of addressing this.
Right, getting in there and physically moving the body.
Yeah, but progress can be agonizingly slow because the patient is desperately trying to send a voluntary signal that just won't travel down the broken line.
So scientists recognized this bottleneck decades ago, right? And
Yeah.
started looking for a way to bypass the broken lines entirely, to give the body an external spark of help.
Exactly. And if the goal is to artificially bypass the broken lines and keep the muscles alive, we have to look at the people doing the hard, honest work of proving how to do that safely.
Which brings us to the Danish researchers who authored our main source today. Let's look at them.
Yeah, we are looking at a highly regarded team from the Neurovascular Center of Zealand University Hospital in Roskilde, Denmark. Mulling Levin, Holmstead Christensen, Henriette Busk, and Troels Winnek.
And Denmark has a strong global reputation for incredibly careful, ethical medical research, right?
Absolutely. And this meta-analysis is a perfect example of that rigor. I mean, they systematically searched through 6,064 scientific papers.
Wow. Over 6,000.
Yeah, filtering out all the noise to select only the highest quality randomized controlled trials.
Out of over 6,000 papers, how many actually made the final cut for their analysis?
They narrowed it down to just 20.
Only 20.
Just the 20 absolute best, most pristine studies. By pooling those trials, they ended up with a robust data set of 956 stroke survivors with a mean age of about 62 years old.
And the intervention they were analyzing across these nearly 1,000 patients is called neuromuscular electrical stimulation, or NMES.
Right, NMES.
The core idea is delivering gentle, carefully controlled electrical pulses through surface electrodes placed on the skin. It essentially gives the muscle a workout without needing the brain's input.
Exactly, it bypasses the brain entirely.
But I have to push back here for a second because I know what you, the listener, might be picturing. When I hear electrical muscle stimulation, my mind immediately goes to those gimmicky late-night TV infomercials from the 90s.
Oh yeah, the full-body suits.
Yes. You know, people wearing these suits with wires everywhere, violently vibrating their way to six-pack abs while eating potato chips on the couch. I mean, is this just making muscles twitch for the cameras, or is this actual medicine?
What's fascinating here is how strictly the clinical application differs from that commercial marketing. This isn't about, blasting the whole body with electricity or seeking cosmetic results.
Right, it's not a weight loss shortcut.
Not at all. The studies included in this meta-analysis utilized targeted, precise clinical applications. The electrodes are placed over very specific, isolated muscle groups that require support.
So a physical therapist is looking at exactly which muscle is failing and targeting just that one spot.
Exactly that. For instance, if a patient has foot drop, where they can't lift the front of their foot and are at risk of tripping, the clinician places the electrode specifically on the muscles of the shin that handle that lifting motion.
Okay, so it's super localized.
Right. The stimulation acts as a localized, intelligent coach for that specific muscle. While the brain is busy healing its circuitry upstream, the NMES is passively forcing the muscle to contract and relax.
It maintains muscle strength, pumps fresh blood into the area, and prevents that tight spasticity we talked about earlier.
You got it.
It keeps the house in perfect working order so that when the power line finally gets reconnected, the lights can actually turn on.
I love that.
It's a great way to think about it.
But when we look at the results of this massive meta-analysis, the data revealed a highly significant and honestly surprising distinction in how medical science even measures the concept of recovery.
Yeah, this part is really crucial. The researchers evaluated two primary categories of outcomes. The first is what clinicians call functional motor ability.
Okay.
And the second is activities of daily living, which is frequently abbreviated as ADL.
And the results were completely split. The data showed a significant improvement in activities of daily living. Yes, the researchers recorded what statisticians consider a moderate effect size on paper. But when you translate those numbers to real life, it is a highly meaningful effect.
Right. People got noticeably better at dressing themselves, eating, and personal care.
Exactly.
However, the data showed no overall significant effect on functional motor ability. I'll admit, when I first read that, I was confused. How on earth can a patient get significantly better at eating and dressing themselves, but their actual motor ability hasn't improved?
I know, it sounds like a paradox until you understand the clinical difference between capacity and performance.
Capacity and performance. Okay, break that down for us.
Functional motor ability measures capacity in a very sterile, standardized way. Clinicians use tests where you are graded on whether you can perform a movement perfectly, just like you did before the stroke.
Like, can you isolate the bicep perfectly?
Right. Can you articulate the wrist with pristine, normal biomechanics? That is capacity.
And the electrical stimulation didn't significantly improve that perfect textbook execution.
No, it didn't. But activities of daily living, which is performance, is measured entirely differently. A test for ADL doesn't care if your movement looks textbook perfect.
It only cares about the real-world outcome.
Exactly. Can you button your shirt?
Yeah.
Can you feed yourself independently, even if you have to use a slightly different compensatory movement strategy to do it?
Oh, I see.
Maybe you have to hike your shoulder up a bit to compensate for a weak elbow, but the fork gets to your mouth. Think of it like taking a driving test. Capacity is passing the textbook exam in an empty parking lot, sitting with perfect 10-2 posture, checking your mirrors every 3 seconds.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Performance is successfully and safely driving yourself to the grocery store in the pouring rain to get milk for your family.
Right.
Even if you grip the wheel a little differently than the instructor taught you.
That captures it perfectly. The post-stroke brain is incredibly pragmatic. Much of motor recovery isn't a true, pristine physiological regeneration of the original neural pathway.
It's the brain learning a behavioral compensation.
Yes, it wires a detour. The NMES, by keeping the muscles primed, active, and receiving blood flow, seems to give patients the physical runway they need to figure out those compensatory strategies faster.
Allowing them to actually live their lives with dignity, which is the entire goal of rehabilitation in the first place.
Totally.
Nobody goes to physical therapy because they want a high score on a clinical arm test. They go because they want to hold their grandchild again.
Exactly.
So if we know this treatment helps patients function in the real world, we need to look at when and where to apply it to get the best results. The meta-analysis isolated these bright spots beautifully.
It really did.
Let's talk about the timing first. When is the best time to start applying these electrodes?
Timing is arguably the most critical variable in neurology. The researchers categorized the patients based on how much time had passed since their stroke. Acute, subacute, and chronic stages.
Okay.
The data show that the most significant gains happened when the electrical stimulation was started in the subacute stage.
When you say subacute, what kind of timeline are we actually looking at? Like a few days?
The subacute stage is generally defined as the window from roughly 1 week to 6 months post-stroke.
Okay, 1 week to 6 months.
Interestingly, the chronic stage, meaning patients who started the therapy more than 6 months after their stroke, did not show that same significant effect in the pooled data.
Wow. Why is that 1 week to 6 month window so magical for the brain?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the subacute window is a period of heightened, aggressive neuroplasticity.
The brain is actively rewiring.
Yes, the initial shock, trauma, and swelling from the brain injury have subsided. Now, the nervous system is actively trying to heal and rewire itself. It's casting out new neural nets, desperately searching for connections.
And the electricity helps with that.
When you apply targeted NMES during this specific window, you are feeding the brain vital sensory feedback.
Wait, so the electricity doesn't just go into the muscle and stop there. It actually sends a message back up the arm.
Precisely. The external electricity forces the muscle to contract and the joint to move.
Right.
The sensory nerves in that muscle detect the movement and send an afferent signal, which is a sensory message, back up the spinal cord to the brain.
It's essentially shouting, hey, we are still down here. Wire us in.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
gives the recovering brain vital opportunities to practice movement and form new connections when it is most biochemically receptive to doing so.
It's literally striking while the iron is hot. Now, what about the where? Because the brain's map is huge. Does this electrical spark work equally well for helping someone walk as it does for helping them use their hands?
The data revealed a very clear distinction here. Stimulation focused on the upper extremity, the shoulder, the arm, the wrist, the hand, delivered clear, statistically significant benefits for daily function.
And the legs.
Lower limb stimulation, however, only showed a tendency toward improvement, but it did not reach clear statistical significance in this specific meta-analysis.
Huh. Why do you think the arms and hands respond so much better to this therapy than the legs?
It likely comes down to the complexity of the movements required for daily living. Walking is a gross motor function. It relies heavily on central pattern generators in the spinal cord. It's highly automated.
Right, you don't really think about each step.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But upper extremity tasks, feeding yourself, personal hygiene, dressing, they require exquisite fine motor control and highly complex compensatory strategies.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because NMES gives the muscles the physical runway to practice those intricate compensations, the upper limbs show a much more dramatic improvement on tests measuring daily independence.
Being able to use your arm and hand again fundamentally changes the entire geometry of your day.
It really does.
That makes total sense. If you can't walk, a wheelchair can still give you mobility. But if you can't use your hands, you lose almost all personal independence.
Absolutely.
Which brings us back to the mystery I brought up at the very beginning of this deep dive. I know you listening might be wondering about the most devastating cases, especially if you have a family member in this situation.
It's a huge concern for families.
Does this targeted electrical approach work for someone who is completely paralyzed, or do they need to have some baseline voluntary movement for the stimulation to be effective?
The answer the Danish team found in their subgroup analysis is one of the most counterintuitive and, frankly, most hopeful findings in the entire paper.
Tell me.
They categorized patients based on their severity of paresis. Paresis is the medical term for muscular weakness, or partial paralysis caused by nerve damage.
Right.
You would naturally assume that patients with moderate weakness would see greater benefits than patients with severe weakness.
Right, because the moderate patients have a head start. They have some unbroken power lines, to use our analogy.
But the data show the exact opposite regarding functional motor abilities. For patients with only moderate paresis, the addition of the electrical stimulation did not show a significant jump in their functional motor abilities compared to standard therapy alone.
Wait, really?
Yeah, but for patients with severe paresis, meaning their muscles were profoundly weak or almost completely paralyzed, the NMES showed a highly significant positive effect.
How is that physiologically possible? The patients with the most severe paralysis got a specific, measurable benefit that the moderate patients didn't get.
It comes down to the practical limitations of standard physical therapy.
Yeah.
If a patient has moderate paresis, they have enough baseline neural connection to actively participate in voluntary physical therapy.
They can mentally command their arm to push against a resistance band?
Right, they can actively practice lifting a cup. The standard physical therapy is already doing the heavy lifting for their recovery, so the electricity doesn't add a massive statistical benefit on top.
Okay.
But if a patient has severe paresis, they literally cannot perform voluntary training on their own. They can't lift the cup. They can't push the band.
They are just sitting there, trapped in their own body.
And because they are trapped, their muscles are at massive risk of rapid atrophy, severe spasticity, and long-term degradation of the neuromuscular junction, which is the actual bridge between the nerve and the muscle.
Wow. So for this severely affected population, NMES is uniquely feasible.
Yes, it steps in as a passive external driver. It physically forces the muscle fibers to fire, preserving the architecture of the muscle and keeping that neuromuscular junction active.
It artificially bridges the gap so that the muscle doesn't wither away.
Exactly. Ensuring that when the brain finally manages to send a weak signal down a newly rewired path weeks later, there is actually a healthy receptive muscle waiting at the end of the line.
And it does all this without causing harm. That was another detail from the meta-analysis that really stood out to me.
Oh, the safety profile is incredible.
Right. Across all these 20 trials, encompassing nearly 1,000 patients, there were 0 adverse effects reported from the stimulation. It was entirely safe and well tolerated.
Which is paramount when you are dealing with a medically vulnerable population. You need interventions that offer potential upside without introducing new risks.
So what does this all mean? If we zoom out and look at everything we've unpacked today from this rigorous Danish research, well, it tells us that electrical muscle stimulation is not a magic cure-all.
Definitely not.
It absolutely does not replace the incredibly hard, frustrating work of standard physiotherapy, and it doesn't replace top-tier medical care.
But it is a safe, validated, stackable tool.
Exactly. It is something that can work directly alongside those traditional methods to give a patient the best possible chance at reclaiming their daily life.
It's about optimizing the environment for recovery. By using targeted NMES, especially in that crucial 1 to 6 month subacute window, and especially for the upper limbs or in cases of severe weakness, you are giving the body more repetitions, more sensory feedback, and more structural support.
It's profound.
This raises an important question about how we view the human body itself. We often treat the body like a machine that just breaks and needs spare parts.
Right.
But science like this reminds us that the human nervous system is incredibly dynamic. It has an extraordinary capacity to adapt, to reroute, and to heal. Sometimes it doesn't need to be fixed with a wrench. It just needs the right kind of gentle, intelligent support to remember what it is capable of doing.
I love that perspective. The body isn't a broken machine. It's a living system actively looking for a way forward.
Perfectly said.
And I think that's the biggest takeaway for you, the listener. Whether you are someone who is just insanely curious about the frontiers of medical science, or perhaps you have a loved one who is currently navigating the daunting journey of stroke recovery, this research proves that conversations about EMS technology do not have to be rooted in late-night infomercial hype.
They really don't.
They can be grounded in solid, peer-reviewed science that offers realistic, actionable hope. The most important next step, if this is relevant to your life, is to take this kind of data and discuss these targeted therapies with your medical team to see if it fits into a personalized rehabilitation plan.
Always talk to your doctors first.
Yes, absolutely. And it leaves me thinking about our electrical grid analogy from earlier. If gentle electrical pulses from a surface electrode can act as a supportive coach, keeping our muscles trained and our houses lit up while our brain goes offline to repair those down power lines, Well, it makes you wonder,
Wonder what?
what other passive technological bridges might we discover in the next decade to help our nervous system communicate when the mind-body connection is temporarily severed? I mean, if we can safely bridge a wrist extensor today, what massive neural pathways might we be able to safely bridge tomorrow?
That is an amazing thought.
Something to mull over as you go about your day. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.